Well, I'm Leslie Morris. I was born in Harlem Hospital, February 7th, 1937. And Harlem Hospital is a hospital in New York City. Okay. My sister was born 2 years later. And then my mother died a year after that. So my father was a widower in 1940. He did, I guess, best he could with two young kids. I recall going to PS 90, which is right across the street from where we were living, and staying with a babysitter, I guess, after school. Her husband happened to be, and this is now during the war years, her husband was a captain in the Navy, and from what I understand, a torpedo split his shit in half, and he ended up dying. But anyway, down the road there, somewhere along the way, I guess my father decided that he needed some help or something, so he sent us down to my aunt in New Jersey, a little town called Crosswicks, New Jersey. And my sister and I spent, from what I could figure, up to about 1945 or 46 with her. And then we moved to another place down there with a lady taking care of us. And finally, I came back to New York around 1950. I was about 13 years old. When I got to New York, the first thing, of course, you do is get enrolled in school. And New York City school systems, you could be in the 8th grade, and if you're in real 8th grade, you're in 8-1. If you're in the 4th grade, you're in 8-13. Okay? So they automatically put me in 8-13, figuring I didn't know anything. And after a couple of days of that, I came home and told my father, they're wasting my time, really. They're still learning multiply and divide, and I've been doing fractions and everything else for the longest. So I kept telling him they're wasting my time. So finally, truant officer showed up, and I missed school for 44 and a half days. That father had to take a day off to go talk to and he was like burnt. He was really mad. So the next day, I'm in the 8-1 class and studying to go to Brooklyn Tech. Now, Brooklyn Technical High School in New York is a high school that has 7 engineering courses. They literally, and 6 engineering courses and 1 preparatory course. And they're literally preparing you for college. As a matter of fact, my first 2 years of college, I did the exact same thing I did in Brooklyn Tech. So I took the aeronautical engineering course, and once I graduated from Brooklyn Tech in 1955, no money, so college was almost out. I started working in the Brooklyn Navy Yard as an apprentice welder. And in the evening, I was going to Pratt Institute. I had started a thing with the Brooklyn Navy Yard, and so you stayed right there and went to basically college in the evening. Of course, when I turned 18, I was now draft bait, and I'm thinking, if I go into the Army, I'm going to be digging foxholes. They got this program called Aviation Cadets. Now let me take a look at that and make me learn how to fly. But more important, once you pass the Aviation Cadet program test, you are no longer draft bait. And I figured the Air Force will tell you, don't call us, we'll call you. And so I went and took the test. I passed the test, and I got a letter from the Air Force saying, don't call us, we'll call you. All right? I also got a letter from the Air National Guard saying, we can get you a class right away. Well, I ignored that letter because that was not the plan. The plan was to stay civilian and get the college out of the way. I got a second letter from the Air National Guard saying, don't call us. Come on down, we can get you a class right away. And I ignored that one. The third one said, if you don't get your butt down here, we're going to send the APs after you. So I went down to Floyd Bennett Field, and they were flying B-26s. And they asked me, well, when do you want to go to the program? I told them I'll finish up this term with Pratt, and I'll go then. So April of 1957, I went to become an Air Force cadet, aviation cadet. Spent 3 months in Lackland learning how to salute and all that kind of good stuff. And finally went to Marianna, Florida, where I started doing my basic flying. And I flew there, we got through that program. In January of 1958, I ended up in Greenville, Mississippi, in a real Air Force program, an Air Force base. Marianna in Florida was a civilian contract. But then we went to Greenville, and I was planning on flying multi-engine airplanes because that's what the Guard had when I joined. But in the process, they went from multi-engine airplanes to fighters. So I ended up in Greenville, Mississippi, and a T-33. I'm flying that, and I went from there until July 1958 when we graduated. And became second lieutenants, and we were sent to out to Williams Air Force Base for combat crew training. And that's the reason I'm here today, believe it or not. Meanwhile, when I was still in New York City growing up, I became a Boy Scout. And then after 14, you become an explorer. And my explorer advisor, Mr. Kendall, was an electrical engineer. So we learned Morse code, we learned photography, we learned electronics. And he also had a niece that lived in Virginia would come up and visit him during the summer. I ended up marrying her. So, her name is Virginia. It was Virginia Morgan at that time. And after I graduated from cadets, I became a second lieutenant on July 23rd, 1958. July 26, 1958, I was married. And I didn't get a chance to spend that big paycheck that you get once you become an officer. And we stayed married for 59 years, 11 months, and 15 days when she passed back in 2018. So I got back to New York, went back into the Navy Yard. This is a 4-year course, by the way. Welding. And then I saw the advertisement for air traffic controller, and I qualified for that very easily with my Air Force experience. So I became air traffic controller at New York Center. And, I guess it was somewhere around August or September 1958. And they sent me to school out in Oklahoma City. And while I was out there learning to become air traffic controller, my wife had our son. So I missed that also. His name is Michael. Michael Dennis the Menace Morris. All right. So got back and became air traffic controller in 1958. I eventually became a radar controller and a coordinator, and also the crew instructor. And then a fellow named Kenny White in 1965 says, Les, you still interested in flying for the airlines? I said, yeah, of course. Says, I got a connection. And he worked it out that I ended up going down to Miami roughly October of 1965. I took the Stay 9 test, which you have to pass, had an interview, and by the time I got back home, they were calling, a phone call, Want to know, did I want to be a first officer or a co-pilot in Atlanta on a Martin 404? And I said, thanks, but no thanks. He said, well, would you like to be a second officer or a flight engineer in New York? I said, yeah, that's a great idea. So I became a second officer or flight engineer on the Constellation. Now, those of you who don't know, the Constellation, that was a 4-engine airplane with 3 tails. It was a long-range airplane, originally built for TWA to go to Europe. And this is propeller engines, not jet engines, by the way. All right. And as a flight engineer, you had your hands full back there. You had to control the 4 engines. You had the fueling. You had the hydraulics. You had the pressurization. It wouldn't be too bad, but all these things I learned when I was in Brooklyn Tech in the aeronautical engineering course. So they hired me on November the 8th, 1965, and put me into the engineering school to learn how to fly, how to control the Constellation. Well, I already knew why the right gear came up before the left gear and all that kind of business. I was not accustomed to lunch periods. Air traffic control, you ate when you got a chance, okay? Sometimes not at all. And so as a result, this 12 to 1 o'clock lunch period just didn't hack it with me. I show back up at 1:30 or so because what they're teaching I already know. So one day, a guy walks into the room and everybody seemed to know him except for myself. I didn't know who he was. So I asked my roommate later on, he says, he didn't interview you? I said, no. Hell, he's the chief pilot for Eastern Airlines. So, well, I wasn't interviewed by him. So a couple of days later, as I come wandering in, instructor says, Captain Halberton wants to see you immediately. Well, I figure I'm fired already, so let's see, can I get that job back as air traffic controller, you know? So I go and see Captain Halberton, and while I walk in, I saw him Les Morris. I thought somebody put a firecracker under the secretary's desk. She jumped up so fast and went running into the office and opened the door and ushered me in. And this is the guy that I was interviewed by. He happens to be Senior Vice President of Flight Operations. So he informed me I was the first black pilot with Eastern Airlines, and that if we have any problems whatsoever, here's my home phone number, here's my office phone number. You call me no matter what time of the day or night it is. And come on, I want you to meet some other folks. So off I went, and I met Floyd Hall, who was a chairman or president of Eastern, Jimmy Plitten, who was a former Tuskegee Airman. I met him, and I met all these other big wigs. And then I went to dinner with Captain Halberton at his home. I got back to the hotel about midnight, and my roommate says, thought they fired your ass. He said, we see no more of you. But when I got back to the hotel, I see your clothes are still here, so I guess you were still around, all right? So I was, they welcomed me with open arms. And Eastern was known as a Southern airline. But boy, I tell you, Eastern started flying out here. Eastern was just an East Coast airline. Eastern started flying out here. We stand laying over at the hotel there on Congress, which at that time was a Holiday Inn. And so, you know, I looked around here and I thought, boy, it's a pretty neat little town here. And of course, nowhere near the traffic and stuff we had nowadays. But this is back in 81, 82, and that time. So I brought Virginia out here on vacation to see where she could handle the heat, et cetera, you know. And that was around August of 84, yeah. And so I said, well, let's go down to Mexico. And we went down I-19, and I saw the sign saying Green Valley. So, you know, I heard about this little town. Let's go take a look. That was on a Saturday. We met a real estate agent. She took us all around. And we got back to the hotel. And I said, you know, the houses are nice, but the rooms are just too damn small, you know. So we called the agent and told her the rooms are too small. She says, well, good. Come on down here tomorrow. I got 3 houses to show you.
Wow.
And so she showed us the one I live in, and she didn't have to go any further. That was on a Sunday. Tuesday, I owned the house. Yeah,
Still there.
still there. Right. 29 years in June. Yeah, right. That's when I moved here. Yeah, right.
Permanently, yes.
Yeah, right.
permanently,
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it sounds like you've been back and forth to Arizona.
Yeah, yeah. So, yeah, with her retiring, shaking me up badly. That was a good retirement, boy, I'm telling you. Yeah. AT&T still taking care of me. Ended up 27 years with Eastern because I went on strike in 1989, and I finally retired at 1991. And while they were on strike, I saw the writing on the wall because they had sold the company to, God, what was his name? One of these airline busters, Frank Lorenzo. And I knew we weren't going to survive. So I took the job as the chief pilot for the Pan Am shuttle. And I spent 2 years there with the Pan Am until Delta bought them out in 1991. 91, yeah, or 92. So they offered me the job as assistant station manager. I said thanks, but no thanks. And we had already bought a house out here in Tucson, in Green Valley, back in 1984. However, at that time, I was still waiting for my wife to retire, and she had another good 12 years with AT&T. So we lived in New Jersey. I took a job with Flight Safety International. Now, Flight Safety International is a company that's set up to teach corporate pilots how to fly their jets. And it's one of the biggest organizations going. And if you have flight safety credentials, the insurance drops quite precipitously. So I ended up with flight safety and teaching on the Falcon 900, which was basically you could put it as a 19-passenger airplane, but corporate people own it, and you had a bedroom and all the other kind of good stuff. And I flew part-time with Paul Tudor. Now, Paul Tudor is a investment broker down on Wall Street. He came to Harlem years ago with eighth grade class and told them they got free tuition no matter what they do. All they had to do is get there. And that's the whole class. Give you an idea what he was like. So part-time I flew with him. It was really enjoyable because I had taught his crew members how to fly the airplane. And so I've worked with flight safety and also became what's called a snow captain for Kennedy Airport. And basically a snow captain for Kennedy Airport, when it snowed, you went to Kennedy Airport, you got with the management there, which is the Port Authority, and you rode around and you observed them cleaning the runways and do whatever was needed. And then after that, you approved what was called a NOTAM, which is at that time called a notice to airmen, saying that the runways are cleared and this is whatever the situation is. And then if any captain or airline wanted any information, they would contact me, and I would give them the latest information that I knew of as far as weather conditions, etc. So from November of 1993 into March of 1994, it snowed every weekend. So I was at Kennedy Airport quite a bit in between working with flight safety. And when I got home around January, I guess, 1994, Virginia said, I just retired. Oh, you what? Hello. And not only that, but I also called the moving company. We'll me from moving in June. Excuse me. So I end up, finishing up with flight safety there. And of course, we have a Flight Safety International down here at Tucson Airport. And they sent the word down, New York sent the word down to Tucson that I was heading in that direction. So she and I were in a hotel waiting to get the furniture and stuff into the house. And I get a phone call at the hotel. Yeah, it's Flight Safety. And I figure, how did you track me down to this hotel? Because I'm staying at, over there on Speedway in Wilmot. It's now a Marriott Hotel, but at that time it was something else. But anyway, yeah, come on over, Les, we don't talk to you. So I went over, had my interview there, and I ended up being an instructor on the Lear 60, which is one of the bigger Learjets. So overall, I spent 23 years with Flight Safety, and I finally retired in 2016. Back in 1969, I was instructing, civilian-wise, with a fellow named Ed Gibbs. Now, Ed Gibbs and the people that created Negro Airmen International were former Tuskegee Airmen instructors. They were the civilian instructors. Okay, you may have heard of Chief Anderson. Charles Alfred Anderson was the chief pilot, and Ed Gibbs and Dave Harris and a whole bunch of them I can name were his instructors, including Roscoe Draper, who is now 103 years old. So he started NAI, or Negro Airmen International, and I was instructing him on flying instruments. And he says to me, and he had a convention going on down in the Bahamas for that summer. And he says to me one day, I need you to join NAI, and you're going to be the treasurer, because my treasurer just quit. So I said, okay. And they had 2 chartered airplanes of people going to the Bahamas, and the treasurer had just quit on him. So I ended up taking the job as the treasurer, and finally got things organized somewhat to where I could figure out what's going on. And we had a good time down in the Bahamas and everything. And when we got back, we would have these yearly meetings, usually 2 or 3 meetings a year, where we had the press there and everybody, and all impressive and everything. And Ed was a politician, by the way. But nothing's being done. So with my experience of being a flight instructor, I came across a lot of students that could fly the airplane, but having the faintest idea of what they're doing otherwise. And so 1971, I created the Summer Flight Academy for NAI. At that time, NAI Summer Flight Academy. And we held a 2-week course down in Tuskegee, Alabama, where the original Black Airmen learned to fly. And Chief was still there. Chief Anderson was still there, and he would help and give out. And I enjoyed working with him, you know. He had a little dog named Yo-Yo, a little black thing about that big. And Chief would say, when I take a student up and get ready to let him go solo, if Yo-Yo stayed in the airplane, then the kid went solo. If Yo-Yo got out of the airplane, he didn't solo that day. And anyway, so I created NAI, the Summer Flight Academy, which still today is going on down in Houston, Texas. They renamed it, is now, 1997, we gave up Negro Airmen International, became Black Pilots of America. And I was the first president, I was president with NAI for 12 years. And when I gave it up, the next guy that came in behind me just destroyed the organization. I mean, I don't know what his ideas was, but so we decided we start Black Pilots of America. So we did that in 1997, and we continued on with the Summer Flight Academy. And then 2002, they renamed it Summer Flight Academy as the Black Pilots of America, Les Morris Summer Flight Academy. All right.
How did you feel when they renamed your name?
Oh, embarrassed. Really, but you know, it was an honor, believe me. Yeah, yeah. By that time, I started in 1971, so 2002 was for 31 years. Yeah. hmm And so finally, after running it, I don't know how long, I finally got someone else to become the director. But each and every July, I'm still there doing what I need to do to move things on. We got 2,000, somewhere around 2,025 members or so, of which about half of them are really active all the time. We have 3 events a year. We have a board of directors meeting in January, and that floats around to different chapters. And then in May, we have the fly-in. We call it Operation Skyhook. And this is where all the chapters come together and compete, show how good they are with their airplanes. It's a 4-day operation from Thursday until Sunday. And we do formation flying, we do bomb drops, we do pylons, and we do balloon busting and spot landing. And the balloon busting is really interesting because you come along and a person's holding the balloon and you tell them to release it, and then you go up and you think the propeller will break the balloon. I've seen a balloon go right through the propeller and go right on by. It's not as easy as it sounds or it looks. So then at Sunday night, the day before Memorial Day, we have our banquet and everything and award the trophies and all that kind of business. So everybody's invited to Pine Bluff, Arkansas, Memorial Day weekend. It's all free. You just have to get there. Since then, I've been, I'm still the treasurer of Black Pilots of America. I wasn't a treasurer from 1971 until now, but I've been in and out of the job a few times. Anyway. What else I need to tell you? My grandparents, I think I may have met my grandfather. He was 100 and some years old and died in 1945, looking at back at our. I remember one year I was down in Plainfield, New Jersey with another aunt just for the summer or whatever. And I remember going out with this old guy and buying me fig Newtons, okay? And I presume that was my grandfather on my mother's side, okay? I never did meet my grandfather on my father's side, or any of my grandparents, really. That's the only one I can remember, yeah. My sister passed away in, let's see, she was 62, so she passed away somewhere around 2015 or so. And I'm still here.
How would you like to be remembered?
That I try to help folks as much as possible. Whenever they came to me with a problem, and that I had an illustrious year flying. I've been flying since 1955. As a matter of fact, when I graduated from Brooklyn Tech, I received $25, and I spent just about all of it between Long Island Railroad, got into a Piper Cub, which I really didn't like because I had to sit in the back seat because of weight and balance problems, with the instructor in the front seat, looking at the straight ahead and telling you what to do, in a noisy airplane. But I stuck with it and got to solo. The reason you had to sit in the back seat is when you go by yourself, the weight and balance required that you be in the back seat. So you learn from the back seat. I ended up soloing, but then I ended up going into the Air Force and getting my certificates and everything there. But But anyway, I would like to be known as trying to help folks as much as possible. Having multiple 60-some years of flying experience. As a matter of fact, I just met with the president of UFO. That's the United Flying Octogenarians, flying over 80 years, still flying. And so I just met with him this past, about 2 weeks ago, as he made a tour through the West Coast. So being a good pilot, I received a award from the FAA for 50 years of safe flying. And that's about it. My advice for young folks that I talk to is to do no matter what you're doing, do it as best you can. If it's sweeping floors, vacuuming chairs, or flying airplanes, do the best you can, and it will pay off at the end. Don't take shortcuts, all right? And because once you get in the habit of doing the job correctly, it becomes instinct. And especially if you're flying, because sometimes you don't have time to think about things. You just got to use instinct and do it, all right? There have been a couple of times I may have let a co-pilot go too far before I took over the airplane, but, you know, when I took it over, we were still flying. We weren't guessing or having to have a problem about who's flying the airplane or how it's going to be flown. But, yeah, so if you do it correctly the first time and you get in the habit of doing it correctly, instincts take over after a while.